That was something they noticed. They thought it might be useful if people had that function. Press the OK button to stop it recording, and it stops like that. Now I'm going to go through the menus in the camera. There's 4 modes to start with. You've got the video mode, which is the one it goes into straight away, followed by the photo mode, and then there's the playback mode, which is the one we're in now. We can flick forward and back through the different videos we've recorded, play them back with sound, fast forward them, all that kind of stuff. The next one is the setup mode, the setup menus. Notice at the bottom right, 1 out of 8. There's 8 screens of these. This is all the setup menus. There's nothing else hidden in the camera, so if you don't see it in here, it doesn't do it. I'm going to go through these. I'd hate to do this to anyone, but people do ask. Those are your different resolutions, 1080p, 720p and a few others. Cyclic record, if you want to record in little segments, you can do that in here, or you can leave that off and it will record up to 4.3 gigabytes per file and keep recording obviously till the card's full. HDR mode, on or off. I'll show you what difference that makes to video later. Motion detection, if you want, you can have the camera start recording when it detects motion, and obviously you'd set that on to do that in that menu there. Sound recording, turn the sound on and off. You can record video without sound if you want. Date stamp, this is where you choose whether to have a stamp on your video or not. Those are the different photo resolutions. Sequence, I'll show you that later on. It takes photos one after the other automatically if you set that on. Those are your different quality settings there. Best to leave it, I think, in normal. I think anything else might be a bit artificial and sort of do something weird to it. Same with sharpness, so set that in normal as well. Auto white balance, or white balance is the next one. You can choose between those ones. Best to leave it in auto. You don't want to be messing around with that all the time. You can do some different effects there, black and white, sepia, ISOs. You can move that up and down. Again, leave that in auto probably. Exposure, best to move the exposure up by 1, a little tiny bit, because I've got a feeling that this camera is another one of those ones that records things a little bit dark if it's left at 0. So I did it up to 1/3 on some of these clips, and they do look a lot better. Face detection, not something I've actually played with, but that'll be for photos. I suppose if you smile, it'll take a photo or something stupid like that. Anti-shaking, that's just for photos, not for video, just for photos. Image stabilization, you can't do it in videos. Quick review, if you take a photo, it'll show it on screen for those number of seconds. That's how you adjust the date and time stamp, whether you want just the date or the date and the time or nothing. I don't know why there's 2 offs, there's one earlier on of course as well. Those are your different languages that you can pick from. I'll just go down them now. I'm not going to try and tell you what they all are. I'll pick English, I like that one the best. And that's auto power off, how long the camera stays on without you doing anything before it switches off. The beeps that are in these menus could be annoying. You can switch those on or off. Screensaver, that's how long before the screen goes blank but the camera doesn't turn off. Useful for saving battery power. Frequency 50-60 Hz, the usual stuff. Car mode, you can use it as a dash camera, on or off. You choose that here, and then we've got things like delete and format and change things back to the default setting, and then that's the version number of the firmware that I'm using in this camera. As is customary, I've taken the camera out and about around Manchester over a period of a couple of weeks to get a good feel for it, and these are the videos that you're looking at now. Notice there's a timestamp at the bottom right there. As I mentioned before, during that garbled bit with the menus, you can turn that on or off depending on what you prefer. The video quality is very nice and sharp, very clear. I do notice a little bit of darkness in places, as though it's crushing down the contrast a tiny bit, but really I'm pretty happy with it. Of course, we're dealing with the winter light again, where it's low in the sky, people are all wearing black and things are a little bit dark, so it's not the best time to be testing out a camera like this, but unfortunately this is the time of year it came out, so this is when I'm testing it. I've tried to get the best days I can, but there's a few gloomy ones in here as well. But as you can see, looking at the cobbles and the people and all the rest of it, very sharp, very detailed, left to right, very wide angle lens on this camera, 170 degrees. You can notice the buildings curve in at the edges here. That's 170 degree lens. You can't alter the field of view, it's just got the one in the camera. There's no option to change that, and it does cause a bit of a weird effect at times. Just look at this. As I'll pan down from Manchester Central now, just look how everything sort of bulges a little bit. That's that fisheye effect that you get with the wide field of view. Some people call it barrel distortion. But one thing with the screen on the back of the camera, you can frame things really well. Notice I've got the buildings in perfectly here, the top of that lamppost on the right, everything just how I want it. Again, top of this building here, nice and clear. But sometimes I just feel that it could do with a little bit of punchiness to pull some of the darker parts out at the bottom of the scene, but it does a pretty decent job of getting the exposure right. I'll show you actually, we'll go inside the Printworks here. Notice the camera shaking again, as I mentioned before, no image stabilization on video, just on the photo, but I've taken it in here to show you how it copes with the low light. As you can see, it's doing a very good job again. If you haven't seen any of my videos before, you'll know that this is a pretty dark place in Manchester. If you've ever been here, it's pretty hard to walk around without falling over, so that's doing a very good job. Now I've gone inside here into the Yarndale Centre, into the shopping centre. I'm going to show you the different resolutions, show you a few things about those. So this is 1080p. Notice I've got the HDR off. I'm going to switch the HDR on. I'm going to show you what difference that makes to the video quality. So pay attention now, we'll just flip it over and you can have a look. There you go, that's the HDR on. Notice how it's sort of pulled up a bit of brightness on everything. Most of the clips I've taken have HDR on because I do like the way it looks. It adds a bit of punch to the scene. Now I've done a zoom in here, a crop right in the corner, that's with the HDR on. Notice how you can see the fossil sign, the lush sign and things, that's with the HDR off. Notice it's kind of got a bit of a yellowy tinge when it's got the HDR on. Now the 720p, it looks the same, it's the same field of view, it's not that bad on the resolution, but this chipset can't do 720p 60. It's supposed to be a 720p 60 camera, but it isn't. It's 720p 30 with each frame doubled. So basically it'll show a frame, show the same frame again, and then the next frame. So really you're recording at 720p 60 using up all that data, but you're only getting 720p 30. They might as well just change it to 720p 30 in the menus as far as I'm concerned and be done with it. The chipset can't do 720p 60, so don't expect any kind of firmware update that's going to enable that feature. Now one thing people always want me to demonstrate is water. How a waterproof case copes with water. So I found this fountain, stuck the camera under it, and there you go. For all those people that are obsessed with that kind of thing, look, it's a camera in water and it's still working. Magic. Now, if you ever wondered what the evil Colonel Quaritch out of Avatar does nowadays, you can find him in Manchester city centre, fiddling with himself, giving me a nice sound test. So let's have a listen. With that scowl, he also reminded me a little bit of Moe out of The Simpsons. Now let's have a look at some photos. Here's a video, and here's the photo of the same scene. You can see it's cropped the edges off, so it's a 4:3 format photo rather than 16:9 video. The photos pretty much look like stills out of the video. Not that I'm really complaining, because they're pretty decent quality photos. They're all right, nothing wrong with them. The fact that you've got that LCD screen on the back enables you to frame things properly. Also take a few different photos to make sure you got the exposure right where you pointed the camera. Now one thing I want to show you is how the camera can be used as a dash cam. So I'm plugging it into a USB power supply. Pretend that's plugged into your car here. Plug the other end into the camera. I've set the car mode on in the menus, so notice it starts up, it says welcome when the power is supplied, and it starts recording. You can tell that by the blue flashing LED on the left there and the little red indicator on the screen. Notice it's also charging the battery, of course, at the same time as well. Now I've turned the plug off at the bottom left. Notice we've got the red light gone off the bottom to show there's no power going in. The camera takes a few seconds and then it does switch off on its own. So it's perfectly